Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm outside in the wreck of our beach house at the bottom of the garden where I used to spend all my time reading and writing. It's got a bit weather damaged in recent years, which is a bit of a shame. We'll have to repair it or something. Anyway, I thought I'd sit here today because the sun's out and I thought I'd do a little video about some books about Oz. I can't think when I first read The Wizard of Oz, probably about 9 or 10, by which time I knew the film off by heart. I must have seen it when I was 2 or 3, I think. I seem to have acquired a whole load of books about Oz, not just the original novels, but various versions, some of which have become kind of favourite things. Here's a Scholastic copy from, I think, the 70s, retold, although I think it's retold. It's one of these wonderful Scholastic books that you would have sent off for with a little slip of paper from the brochure that everybody got. It was called Chip Club when I was little, and the next month a box of books would arrive in class, each with its own little slip of paper sticking out. And I'm sure the romance of that, of being given your book as everybody else was getting theirs, has stayed with me. The illustrations in this are marvelous. I prefer them to uh, the original. Actually, this is very 1960s. It looks a little bit like kind of Rankin Bass or Hanna-Barbera kind of drawings. I feel like I'm in the shack that's about to fly through the air in a tornado. This is a recent version, Michael Morpurgo. I think I've talked about this before. His book from the point of view of Toto, the dog, which is a brilliant point of view to take, of course, with Emma Chichester Clark drawings. I love her pictures. Earlier, a few days ago, I showed you my copy of the Michael Foreman illustrations, which I haven't got with me at the bottom of the garden because it went to the bottom of a bookcase. And I think I've put things in front of it now. I got quite involved in this story about 5 years ago when I had to adapt it for Audible. And we did a 4 hour long version of The Wizard of Oz with many, many voices and all the characters and every single episode, which adaptations rarely do. They always forget that once our heroes get to the Emerald City, they leave again on another series of adventures, another quest, and then they have to come back. The film smooths that over, and most versions smooth that over too. But I quite like the later adventures. It's like Baum is kind of making the book up as he goes along. Maybe I'm doing him a disservice. Chapter 12. We fall into the clutches of the Wicked Witch of the West. I'm afraid things often get worse, my dear little puppies, before they get better. It's like that in real life as well as in stories. And of course, this story is real life as well as a story. We thought the worst was over, that things could only get better now. And that's how it looked. We walked on day after day, always going westwards towards the setting sun, finding enough to eat and drink on the way. We had tired feet or paws, but that didn't matter. We were happy enough as we marched along. After all, we thought, we had overcome the worst the Wicked Witch of the West could do to us. And then, one night, I had another horrible dream. I saw in my dream the warty Wicked Witch in her castle, shouting and screaming at her yellow, winky slaves. She was standing before them, hands on hips, a golden cap on her head. "You have failed me, you miserable slaves," she shrieked. "But now I have my magic golden cap on, which never fails me. Whoever owns this cap, and I own it, can command the terrible winged monkeys, but just 3 times. Once I commanded them, and they gave me you, my yellow winkies, my army of slaves, so that you could build my yellow castle, so that I could rule over the country and make it mine. Then I commanded them to drive the great and terrible Wizard of Oz far away to the Emerald City, so that his power could never harm me. And then they did that. And now I shall speak the spell, and they will do my bidding for the 3rd and last time. She stood on her left foot and wiggled her right. E pepper pepper kaki kaki, she cackled loudly. Hillo hollo hello, zizzy zuzzy zick. The sky darkened, then lightning flashed, thunder roared, hailstones rained down. She looked up and pointed. See my winky slaves, they come, she screeched, and out of the storm came a great rushing of wings. I thought at first in my dream that the sky above her must be full of ravens, cawing and chattering. Then all of a sudden the sky shone through, and all around the Wicked Witch I could see they were not ravens at all, but monkeys, flying monkeys. They sat around her now in a vaulted hall of a castle, a crowd of monkeys, huge monkeys with angry teeth and bared eyes, or possibly the other way round. This is a novel I've had since 1992 when it came out. Geoff Ryman's Was a very strange and original retelling of Was and all the stories around it. The story of Judy Garland, the story of Jonathan, our lead character, who's obsessed with Oz. Each chapter is like a little, I don't know what you call them, a little pip, a little cell inside a pomegranate. And they all touch each other, these stories, but they don't always cross over. There were flowers like ground-hugging buttercups the size of Dorothy's hand. There were vivid little stars of blue on the tops of long stems, and plain white flowers clustered together. There were echoing cries of children running to the river, and the shade of giant trees slowing down, showing the silver underside of their leaves in the wind. Drudge, 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 Dorothy? Asked Etta. Dorothy said nothing. She had a wild flower in her hand and was picking it apart. You can work until you disappear, Dorothy. I think this part is the part to do with the real Dorothy, who lives in Kansas, who never escapes and lives this quite difficult life. You can work until you disappear, Dorothy. It won't be enough. People don't love a drudge, but sometimes they love selfish people for doing what they always wanted to do themselves. There was the sound of wind in long grass, and other children playing together. You look tired, Etta said, tired and scared. I find Emma Gulch scary sometimes. Etta crouched down and tried to peer up into Dorothy's face. They're never grateful, Dorothy. You can never do enough in someone else's house. They always think it's their due. You're always the poor relation. What is the point, Dorothy thought, of talking to me like this? This is talk for adults. What am I to do? Leave? Where could I go? Fight? How can I fight Auntie Em? I want to go back, said Dorothy. Etta sighed and said, all right, but promise me, Dorothy, promise me if things get too bad, you won't pray to God to change you. You'll pray to God to change them. It's a very strange and mysterious book, and very moving. I've read this again and again, but not for a number of years. In the dream, Dorothy knew that this was a place where children had been set free. She looked and saw that some of them were not children at all. They were a different kind of adult. They looked like Etta Parkinson. They were tiny and small and giggling, with funny whiskers and conical hats, and they played fiddles or sat with the children who were almost as big as they were on their laps. They both started fires with magnifying glasses and hopped in sack races. Children and the adults were the same kind of creature. Bison grazed on the grass, and a wildcat lazed in a tree, flicking his tail. In the shade there were wigwams, and white smoke curling from the tops. Indian women sat on the ground sorting dried maize in baskets. The children and the Indians played together on the swings. Oh, there's lots of stuff about Native American myth as well in this. Yeah, it's a really recommended novel. Another one from a number of years later is Wicked, of course, which tells the story of the Wicked Witch of the West. And what I love about this edition is Gregory Maguire's introduction, um, where he talks about moving to England and living in London and encountering the England of English literature. A bit like Hélène Hanff in 84 Charing Cross Road, where she dreams of the London of English literature. I can't find the introduction now. That's very odd. It's fallen out of the book. How could it do that? Oh, here. There are good reasons for an American writer to want to live a while in England. Despite the tired jokes, American and British do share several passions. 1990, he talks about. He was moving to London in part because of having read some of those writers like Milne, Kipling, Nesbit, Barrie, Carroll. This is the bit. What a gallery of welcoming spirits seemed on hand to the American writer passing through customs at Heathrow, with a useless American laptop that wouldn't plug into the socket without a converter. I began to imagine writing Wicked while living in a top-floor flat in Harley Street. On quiet nights, I could hear the wolves howling in London Zoo. During the days, I procrastinated. I negotiated a trip with the ancient P.L. Travers in her home at Chelsea. She was sedentary and vague, and she thought I was the man come to read the gas meter. But nonetheless, she wasn't at all surprised that a gas meter reader should be conversant in the arcana of her oeuvre. Somebody is cutting down trees or doing something over there, quite loudly with a machine. I hope you can't hear it. He goes all over Britain, and he talks about Geoff Ryman's Wars. And he goes to the Lake District. I love this bit. When he goes to see Beatrix Potter's farm at Upper Sorey, isn't it, near Hawks Head in the Lake District. In the lane on the way to Beatrix Potter's farm, I stopped to pull a child's colourful knit glove from the mud. Don't ask me why, looking for signs and portents. The tip of each finger sported a tiny knit face. The four fingers were a girl, a lion, a scarecrow, and a tin man. The thumb, which might have been the place to stitch a witch, was unadorned, vacated, or waiting for a story. I returned to London safely and got to work. By then I was holed up in a mansion block off West End Lane in West Hampstead. I scribbled most of the first draft in a cafe called Dominique's, where I could get there early enough to catch the table by the fire before Doris Lessing stopped by for elevenses. Another reason to love England, vying with rogue writers for space by the fire. Ms. Lessing didn't know I existed, but I recognized her and worshipped her from afar, about 10 feet, while hogging her favourite table. I love the idea of him being in an England where writers pop up, like the fantastic characters in Oz. That seems very realistic to me. I'm going to finish off by reading a little bit, an excerpt from this Marks and Spencer's book of fantasy called Over the Rainbow from the 80s. And my bookmark look is a card based on a print by a friend of mine, Katie Buchan, who constructed this picture of a little boy climbing up trees and a bookcase at the same time. I love that picture. It's my life, really, in lots of ways. This is an episode extracted from L. Frank Baum's second Oz book, The Marvelous Land of Oz. Tip's creation, Jack Pumpkinhead, has been brought to life by the wicked witch, Mombi. Now, no longer in need of Tip's help, Mombi has threatened to turn him into a marble statue. Tip reflected. It's a hard thing to be a marble statue, he thought rebelliously, and I'm not going to stand it. For years I've been a bother to her, she says, so she's going to get rid of me. Well, there's an easier way than to become a statue. No boy could have any fun forever standing in the middle of a flower garden. I'll run away, that's what I'll do, and I may as well go before she makes me drink that nasty stuff in the kettle. He waited until the snores of the old witch announced she was fast asleep, and then he arose softly and went to the cupboard to find something to eat. No use starting on a journey without food, he decided, searching on the narrow shelves. He found some crusts of bread, but he had to look into Mombi's basket to find the cheese she had brought from the village. While turning over the contents of the basket, he came upon the pepper box which contained the powder of life. I may as well take this with me, he thought, or Mombi will be using it to make more mischief with. So he put the box in his pocket together with the bread and cheese. Then he cautiously left the house and latched the door behind him. Outside, both moon and stars shone brightly, and the night seemed peaceful and inviting after the close and ill-smelling kitchen. I'll be glad to get away, said Tip softly, for I never did like that old woman. I wonder how I ever came to live with her. He was walking slowly towards the road when a thought made him pause. I don't like to leave Jack Pumpkinhead to the tender mercies of old Mombi, he muttered, and Jack belongs to me, for I made him, even if the old witch did bring him to life. He retraced his steps to the cow stable and opened the door to the stall where the pumpkin-headed man had been left. Jack was standing in the middle of the stall, and by the moonlight, Tip could see he was smiling just as jovially as ever. Come on, said the boy, beckoning. Where to? Asked Jack. You'll know as soon as I do, answered Tip, smiling sympathetically into the pumpkin face. All we've got to do now is tramp. Very well, returned Jack, and walked awkwardly out of the stable and into the moonlight. Tip turned towards the road, and the man followed him. Jack walked with a sort of limp, and occasionally one of the joints of his legs would turn backwards instead of frontwise, almost causing him to tumble. But the Pumpkinhead was quick to notice this, and began to take more pains to step carefully, so that he met with few accidents. Tip led him along the path without stopping an instant. They could not go very fast, but they walked steadily, and by the time the moon sank away and all the sun peeped over the hills, they had travelled so great a distance that the boy had no reason to fear pursuit from the old witch. Moreover, he had turned first into one path and then another, so that anyone should follow so that should anyone follow them, it would prove very difficult to guess which way they had gone or where to seek them. Fairly satisfied that he had escaped, for a time at least, being turned into a marble statue, the boy stopped his companion and seated himself upon a rock by the roadside. Let's have some breakfast, he said. Jack Pumpkinhead watched Tip curiously, but refused to join in the repast. I don't seem to be made the same way as you are, he said. I know you're not, returned Tip, for I made you. Did you? Asked Jack. Certainly, and put you together, and carved your eyes and nose and ears and mouth, said Tip proudly, and dressed you. Jack looked at his body and limbs critically. It strikes me that you made a very good job of it, he remarked. Just so, replied Tip modestly, for he began to see certain defects in the construction of this man. If I'd known we were going to travel together, I might have been a little more particular. Why then, said the Pumpkinhead, in a tone that expressed surprise, you must be my creator, my parent, my father. Or your inventor, replied the boy with a laugh. Yes, my son, I really believe I am. Then I owe you obedience, continued the man, and you owe me support. That's it exactly, declared Tip, jumping up. So let's be off. Where are we going? Asked Jack, when they had resumed their journey. I'm not sure exactly, said the boy, but I believe we are headed south, and that will bring us, sooner or later, to the Emerald City. Right, I'm going to stop there. It's been fun sitting outside rather than in the study. Slightly noisy. I hope you can hear me over the motorbikes and the bird song and the trains going by. Anyway, goodbye, and I will see you soon in the next episode of this. Goodbye.